I've been told that President Obama is deferring his decision to pardon her until after he leaves office, which pretty much shows you that Obama...
How can he pardon her after he leaves office?
That's a good question.
Maybe at the last day of his presidency, maybe.
No, after, meaning like, sayonara, see you later. I'm going to go back to Hawaii, and, I'll consider it when I'm on vacation.
Is she a role model?
I think she is. I think she's a role model. I think she's also very accessible in her humanity. I mean, that's what's so powerful about her. And when people come to know the Manning I saw in the courtroom, they will find somebody who is not fragile, who is not, mentally wavering. This is an individual who is methodical, scientific, earnest, and so neutral that she's not even a propagandist for herself. Manning really believes in the facts and the truth and reason. If one is to say that how other people treat one is the ultimate determiner of all one's behavior, then a person is not free. And there is no hope, because the lowest common denominator and the worst consequence will always decide, essentially, what one will do. And in certain cases, one has to do the right thing. And that's what Manning did. She did the right thing.
So, eine neue Folge. Jung Naiv. Dich kenne ich irgendwoher. Wer bist du?
Ich bin Amerikanerin. Ich heiße Alex O'Brien.
Aber du bist was?
Ich bin Amerikanerin.
Ah.
Ich bin Journalist.
Ah. Aber du sprichst Deutsch.
Ein bisschen. Ich habe an der Universität gelernt.
Und letztes Jahr haben wir noch Englisch miteinander geredet.
Ja, aber meine Englisch ist natürlich besser als mein Deutsch ist. Und es ist eine lange Zeit, als ich Deutsch geredet habe. Also mein Deutsch ist schlecht.
Du kannst ein bisschen Deutsch.
Ja, einfach Conversation. Ja. Aber wenn es ist ein bisschen kompliziert, ich muss Englisch reden.
Aber Gedichte und so kannst du auch.
Wie bitte?
Kannst du Gedichte, habe ich gehört.
Ja, ich kann.
Ja.
Eine Gedichte von Hermann Hesse.
Oh.
Willst du?
Ja, gerne.
Okay. Seltsamen Nebel zu wandern. Leben ist einsam sein. Kein Mensch kennt den anderen. Jeder ist allein. Voll von Freunden war mir die Welt, als nach mein Leben Licht war. Nun da der Nebel fällt, ist keiner mehr sichtbar. Das wahrlich keiner ist weiser, der das nicht das Dunkel kennt, das unentrinnbar leiser von allen trennt. Seltsamen Nebel zu wandern, Leben ist einsam sein, kein Mensch kennt den anderen, jeder ist allein.
Amazing. If I could clap, I would clap. First off, I was going to apologize for last year's episode, where I consequently ignored your nose.
I was very sick. I got sick that morning. I had like 101 fever, and my nose was running, and it was kind of funny. Yeah. It was funny, but I felt bad for the audience because my nose was running.
Well, they were mad at me for not giving you a tissue or something.
No, that's okay.
Yeah. See?
I forgive you.
See, it's okay. So how's we talked about, like last year we talked about Chelsea Manning. Is she free now?
No, she was convicted in summer of 2013 to 35 years in prison. So
for what again?
For espionage and for violating the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, for disclosing documents about U.S. complicity in war crimes and wrongdoing in Iraq and Afghanistan. And there's more.
So you get sent to prison for exposing war crimes?
Yeah, she was convicted under what essentially was a statute intended for spies. Although, really, if you look at the history of the Espionage Act, it's always been used to persecute political dissidents or whistleblowers or from the labor movement in the 1917, when it was started to the present day. Although through the 70s, 80s, and 90s, it was traditionally used to prosecute spies. And in the case of the Obama administration, this U.S. president has used it more than any other president combined against whistleblowers like Chelsea Manning.
Does that make him a great president?
I think perhaps it makes Obama a typical U.S. president in the sense of how much power actually resides in the executive at this point, the office.
Right.
is certainly an important and timely question. I think really it makes no difference who's in office.
Like, if he has so much power, why doesn't he close Guantanamo?
Well, I heard a very interesting analysis of the U.S. presidency recently. I think that the Obama administration, the lack of political willpower, the lack of political capital, reflects perhaps the reality of the office of the presidency, how much power it has actually over the national security state, which is the same regardless of who's in power. I mean, and when you look at the transfer of individuals from civilian intelligence to military, like Panetta or Brennan, you see that the monster is always the same regardless of who's in office.
So who controls who? I mean, does the president or the executive or the legislator, do they control the national security agencies, or do they control them?
I think that one has to look at the structural sort of reality. The fact of the matter is that the same entrenched interests that own the executive own the Congress. And there has been a well-documented breakdown in legislative power for the last, 100 years. When you have a president that makes public appeals to the people, you actually have a president that oversteps the legislative power, their natural legislative power, because the legislature really should be most sympathetic to the people and should have the ability to check the executive, and it really doesn't. And part of that issue is also the nature of how television and technology have also changed the presidency. So there's a lot of, one mustn't be too black and white about it. In the sense that there are a lot of forces at play that have affected and have created the presidency that we have today. Another example is after World War II, the complete permanent establishment of military-industrial complex. And since, the Clinton era, you've had the increased privatization of the intelligence, so much so that, as Tim Schrock has reported, 70% of the U.S. intelligence budget is privatized. And the relationship between private and public government intelligence, military intelligence, is not just simply a partnership. It is a symbiotic relationship. The private sector drives the development of technology that's used both in military application and as well as intelligence application. For example, I mean, one need not even look into the darkness of the black budget, the intelligence budget. Look,
black budget?
Yeah, it's called the black budget.
Because of Obama?
Because it's redacted, because it's dark. Over my head. Whoop, whoop. Oh. Ding, ding, ding. Look at like a company like Panavision. The largest growth sector in 2006 was federal contracts, so lensing for weapons systems. Or look at Sony and IBM's driving processors in the PS2, the video consoles that drive their applications on the military battlefield. So we're talking about...
Really? Mm-hmm. How? Like, can you explain that?
Well, the processors basically... The research and development is really funded by the consumer electronic market and the entertainment market, moviegoers and video gamers worldwide. But the applications are multiple, and they're used. These processors, these core processors, are used on the digital battlefield by U.S. forces when they, for lensing, for satellite imagery, drones, all that kind of stuff. High-resolution satellite imagery.
We've done a lot of episodes on drones and drone strikes and all that, and every time I see a picture of a drone pilot, he sits in a chamber, and it kind of looks like an old school video gaming place, where he's just takes control of the drone, and then if he wants to shoot, he shoots.
In early 2000, a lot of work was done both in academia and then also in the general press about the role of video games in training U.S. Army, soldiers, and then of course like with drone pilots, and certainly there is that aspect of
Like gamification?
gamification. But I think that the problem is even deeper. I mean, when you have a technological cross-fertilization between the technology used in video games or in movie production and the exoteric reality of propaganda from Hollywood or et cetera, and then also the intrinsic sort of mechanics of it being used that actually, create efficient killing, so to speak, I think it's even more sinister. But every tool can be used for good or ill.
Dual use.
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of like an eternal human problem. The question is when you incentivize it and when it becomes so lucrative for people, it's very easy to let go of one's ethics.
What's the good use of killing drones?
What's the good use? Well, you can make great, film shots. You can certainly surveil large landscapes. I mean, there are for geological purposes. It doesn't have to necessarily geological purposes for oil exploration or for conservation. I don't know. I mean, it just depends, is what I'm trying to say.
So, back to Chelsea Manning.
Mm-hmm.
Have you talked to her?
No, Chelsea Manning isn't allowed to talk to journalists.
Who is she allowed to talk to?
She's allowed to talk to her counsel and to family and friends, per the rules of the military brig that she's imprisoned in.
Can you just say you're a friend of hers?
I suppose someone could do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I know Chelsea.
Yeah, I'm not cheap with Chelsea. Like, Chelsea isn't my, I don't say things like loosely with her. I've covered her trial. Her trial was incredibly important for the public.
Did she see you at the trial?
I don't know, because she could never really turn around and look at the gallery. I think that she was aware, but, I don't know.
Do you know how she's doing?
From her talking to her counsel, she's doing fine. I mean, she has currently a military suit against the Department of Defense to give her adequate medical treatment for her being transgendered, something she was diagnosed with prior to her arrest by multiple U.S. Army doctors. It's certainly something that she's been unable to deal with because of the already charged nature of her political persecution, her court-martial. So she's suing the Department of Defense to provide her with adequate treatment. I mean, just like you would provide a diabetic with adequate treatment. But of course, the U.S. military doesn't really want to deal with it, because if they deal with her, then it becomes a policy issue. And the DOD has to deal with its own transphobia in this regard.
There's transphobia?
Yeah, definitely. Take, for example, I mean, even this is my own opinion from my knowledge of the court-martial and her current case. If you look at her treatment at Quantico and you look at the email exchanges between brig officials, prison officials, about Manning's removal of her underwear, they referred to her underwear as panties. I mean, there certainly was homophobia and transphobia. She had been diagnosed with being a trans person prior to her arrest. So the U.S. military that was detaining her was quite well aware of this particular matter in her case. And she has not been able to deal with it. Since her conviction, despite the Department of Defense recognizing that there's a standard of adequate care for a person, which includes not only counseling, but also real-life experience. In fact, there is a study by basically the foremost association for trans medical care that outlines how important it is for incarcerated trans people to actually obtain medical treatment, including hormone therapy if necessary, the ability to have real-life experience in their identified gender, because it alleviates a lot of the depression, anxiety, and even in some cases suicidal tendencies for long-term inmates who are trans people.
Actually saw, I mean, I think the first season of Orange is the New Black actually covered that issue. I don't know if you saw that.
I'm sorry, I don't have time to watch Orange is the New Black. I'm busy working. I'm busy doing serious work. I'm sorry.
Maybe you should be a TV critic. And,
I'm joking.
Yeah. So, she's a woman.
Yeah.
Is she in a women prison?
No, she's actually housed with men. And she's also, it's a military brig, so they are very, really serious about rules. And, for example, she cannot let her hair grow long, and she cannot groom herself in a feminine manner because of the rules of the brig. The Department of Defense also tried to scare her by, sort of threatening through a leak in a press to transfer her to a federal facility, which is not a good idea for Manning. Manning has been convicted of very serious charges and is a trans person. And federal prisons are notorious they're dangerous places. U.S. federal prisons are very dangerous places, especially for someone like Manning. But luckily, the Federal Bureau of Prisons rejected that transfer. And the DOD, as her former civilian attorney said, has to deal with Manning. They have to take care of their own. Manning is a U.S. Army soldier. There are, statistically, according to U.S. Air Force medical personnel own studies, a higher percentage of transgendered people in the U.S. military than in the general population. A lot of times men who are assigned male but identify as women join the military to try to rid themselves of any kind of experience that they're having with being transgendered. Funny enough, this study actually called Flight into Hypermasculinity was found in Manning's dorm room, or CHU. It was called a CHU in Iraq prior to her arrest, like right when she was arrested. So this is a real issue that Manning has been suffering with without medical treatment, and she needs to be taken care of. In addition to, hopefully, her appellate process, which is also going on.
So is there a light at the end of the tunnel for her? I mean, last year you were skeptic about that?
Manning created her own hope, and
How?
She created her own hope by disclosing these documents. Without the kinds of acts that Manning did, there is no hope. So we create our own hope. And I really choose to have that perspective. It's a choice. And, I choose to have hope for Manning because I choose to act, continue to cover her important legal proceedings, and to do what I have to do in my own life.
So she chose to expose the war crimes done by the U.S., and she chose to go to prison for that for the rest of her life, maybe.
I don't know if she chose to do that. I mean, that was the choice of the military prosecutors and the Obama administration and their treatment. But you know what? You cannot live your life if one is to say that how other people treat one is the ultimate determiner of all one's behavior, then a person is not free. And there is no hope, because the lowest common denominator and the worst consequence will always decide, essentially, what one will do. And in certain cases, one has to do the right thing. And that's what Manning did. She did the right thing. So she can live with herself, as she said in her own words. I'm not suggesting that her time in prison isn't challenging, or that it wouldn't be for anybody. I'm simply saying that Manning created her own hope, and she appealed to the public conscience, which is us, which is the higher law. So it's really up to us, and certainly I don't even need to get that abstract about it. It's up to me to do the next right thing.
Is she a role model?
I think she is. I think she's a role model. I think she's also very accessible in her humanity. I mean, that's what's so powerful about her. And when people come to know the Manning I saw in the courtroom, they will find somebody who is not fragile, who is not, mentally wavering. This is an individual who is methodical, scientific, earnest, and so neutral that she's not even a propagandist for herself. Manning really believes in the facts and the truth and reason.
Does she believe in the self-healing power of the United States? I mean,
I'm not gonna speak for her. She has the right to speak for herself, especially now that the court-martial's over. these are just simply my ideas that I've gleaned from observing her as closely as I have.
Has Obama ever talked about her case?
I have been told, well, other than declaring her guilty before trial,
Really?
yeah. And this is a unlawful command influence issue, which probably will come up on appeal, I imagine, because he's the commander in chief of the U.S. military, and so if he says she's guilty. But I want to say this. I've been told that I've been told that President Obama is deferring his decision to pardon her until after he leaves office, which pretty much shows you that Obama...
How can he pardon her after he leaves office?
That's a good question.
Maybe at the last day of his presidency, maybe. No?
No, after, meaning like, sayonara, see you later. I'm going to go back to Hawaii, and, I'll consider it when I'm on vacation.
Do you think that a future U.S. president, like maybe Hillary Clinton, is more open to the idea of?
Well, I mean, no, I don't think Hillary Clinton, the woman whose U.S. propaganda was so effective that we still hear about the names and all the people who were harmed when in fact no one was harmed by the releases. Less than 20 people were moved. Many of them were doing it because they wanted visas to the U.S. or for other reasons. The 900 names in the Afghan war logs, most were killed by U.S. forces or other fighting forces on the battlefield. Manning was accused of dumping by the State Department that Hillary was the head of, and she was only convicted for 240 documents, one of which was called a malaria update one of which related to a malaria update for Kingston, Jamaica. So, this is, I don't think Hillary Clinton is going to pardon Chelsea Manning, but hopefully her appeals process will be successful, or she will be paroled. We cross fingers because she's been charged with espionage, so it's hard to know how a parole board will react to that.
Do you only work on the Chelsea Manning case, or do you do other stuff too?
I do other stuff. I've been spent the last year basically researching stuff related to Manning of the WikiLeaks investigation. I've been scraping up all the drone data that's disappearing by the U.S. Air Force, and I do a lot of other work.
Tell me about that drone data.
Well, the U.S. Air Force and the CIA, the U.S. Air Force has publicly released basically air power summaries related to drone data, and it's disappearing off the internet. So I've spent the last 6 months scraping up as much data as possible. I have hundreds of FOIAs related to various national security issues, including the WikiLeaks investigation out, 2 lawsuits. I've unearthed tens of search warrants related to the WikiLeaks investigation, and I have a lawsuit coming up in the new year related to that. And then I have this multi-FOIA lawsuit that's, for example, one of the things I've worked on for the last few months is a massive Excel sheet of every single federal agency with every single code of federal regulation, every single database, systems of record notice that you would need to actually sue them on a FOIA. So you're talking hundreds of U.S. agencies, but it's, I think, a project that will yield fruit because I like to work at scale, where once the project's done and it's used for my own personal purposes, it goes out into the public and other people can use it.
So what does that drone data could tell us?
Well, it can tell you basically, I don't know if I'm speaking about a lot of things at one time. So what it will tell you a lot about is you can tell a lot of things from data. You can tell, you can go back and find out how many people were actually killed. So you can get accurate statistics on casualties, especially mass civilian casualties, if they occur, when they occur. You can tell a lot from just pattern analysis. So this is information that has been public, that is disappearing off the internet, and then in some cases being reclassified so that you cannot get access to it.
So they make it public, and then they decide, let's get rid of that information.
Yeah. It shows you how arbitrary classification is in the United States, and what a rampant issue that overclassification is. It's such an arbitrary use of power. If it's politically expedient for me, you can have the data. If it isn't, it's classified, and I can charge you with espionage for trying to get it or whatever. I always feel like I'm yelling when I do interviews, by the way.
You're not.
Okay, anyway.
Is she yelling? No.
So that's something that I've been working on. What else have I been working on? There's like so many different things.
Who pays you?
I'm funded by 2 foundations.
Can you tell?
Yeah, basically Net Freedom, and also I've been funded by, oh God, this is so embarrassing. A media foundation in New York City. IMI, I think is what it's called.
And then, do you pitch them your work? Do you say like, I'm gonna work on the drone data thing and Chelsea Manning stuff?
Yeah,
Just give me.
and I also do other things. Like I'm editing a book right now for somebody. So I also publish my own work, and I get paid for that when I publish in general press. I think from the Manning trial, people were very good-hearted towards me in the sense that they knew that the work that I was doing was important, and so they wanted to support it.
And one last thing, last year I remember we talked about First Look, Pierre Omidar's new
You're
media.
going to lead with this in a tweet because you're going to ask me this question, and I'm going to say something, and then you're going to be like, "La, la, la, la."
I promise I won't. But like, I just remembered you kind of being critical of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Do you think you were right?
I was absolutely right, but I think also other people were right. I mean, listen, freedom of the press is very easy for billionaires. That's all I have to say.
Why?
Because money, power, the elite, their own interests are served, and they have a lot of connections. This is sort of the, excuse my language, but the mind fuck of American media, and also I think of the American politics generally. It is when you are wealthy and you are connected. When you're wealthy, you are connected, and when you're connected, it is very easy to get a book deal. It is very easy to get your story in the paper. It is very easy for you to mount a proper defense with skilled attorneys when the government charges you with espionage or tries to threaten you in some way. It is very easy. When you are an average working person, and take Barrett Brown as a perfect example. Chelsea Manning is another perfect example. And you do not have that power behind you, you will be dragged through the press. By the time they're done with you, they'll think you're irrelevant. You don't deserve the protection of the world's larger human rights organizations. You'll be made to be basically a bozo, and an idiot, and someone who somehow deserves the treatment that they're getting. This is why the blockade against WikiLeaks was so important, because the ability to raise funds for many small donations allows someone like Barrett Brown or allows someone like Chelsea Manning to actually mount a proper defense against the U.S. government. So this is very important to me. I'm more interested in myself in ordinary people collectively being able to access and engage politically in the public houses of the internet, so that they feel that the documents are their own, so that they feel that they are empowered to make their own decisions for themselves, whether they be small decisions or large decisions. I do not care about, basically yanking some celebrity's fucking chain. Who gives a shit? Been there, done that. Last 20 years of media in America, it's time to move on. Bored.
So did Laura Poitras and Greenwald, did they sell out? Or did they find a way to manage the conflict of money and power?
They made whatever decisions they needed to make for themselves.
You wouldn't go that way. You wouldn't take that path.
No, I wouldn't.
And I remember Matt Taibbi. There was a conflict.
You know what? Why are we talking about these people? I mean, I get it. Like they're especially with Poitras, I get it. Like
they're relevant journalists.
There are a lot of sort of. This is a long conversation. It's not like a black and white issue.
Right.
There are certainly dangers. There are certainly risks. People make their own choices. To me, I cannot wait until we stop talking about The Intercept and we start talking about the things that are actually going on in the world. We start talking about the political prisoners in the United States that don't have a billionaire to fly in on a jet and talk about the First Amendment. I want to talk about the fact that U.S. foreign policy is completely racist. The whole idea that only white American journalists deserve protection, but Abdullah Shahi, or the journalists around the world that are under severe and constant threat are somehow, poor brown and black journalists, or if they're even considered a journalist by the U.S. government. I mean, I really want to get much more global, much more out of the sphere of the U.S. entertainment superpower.
And one last thing, like last year, there was no crowd reporter. Now we work for Crowd Reporter. It's an online magazine.
Yeah.
And other than First Look, we got our money through crowdfunding. Like we collected €1 million through normal people.
Yeah.
Is that maybe a viable approach to?
It's a viable approach as long as you're not publishing suppressed or classified information or censored information, because then you'll be charged with espionage, or don't try to like interview anybody slightly remotely associated with anybody that's an enemy of the United States or maybe even a member of a terrorist organization, because then you're substantially supporting them. So, I mean, it's a fine line. It depends, I think, on what you're publishing.
Really? Like
We'll take. I mean, this is not a theoretical issue. This is the sort of the WikiLeaks PayPal blockade issue, where you publish suppressed information, and then you get, the U.S. government mounts the largest criminal investigation ever, or you get prosecuted as a source, and you cannot, because in the case of WikiLeaks, they pulled the plug on that. PayPal pulled the plug on that because of the insinuation, not the fact, but the insinuation that WikiLeaks was doing something criminal. So if you publish something like WikiLeaks, you might find that those funding sources are gone. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Okay.
Alexa, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Dankeschön.
Danke.
Good luck with your talk tomorrow.
Thanks.
What are you going to talk about? We're going to link it.
Yeah. Manning's lawyers, Chase Strangio from the ACLU against the DOD, Nancy Hollander, and Ahmed Ghapoor, Barrett's lawyer, is now on Manning's team too. We're going to talk about the appellate case. We're going to talk about the DOD transgendered medical treatment case, and it's going to be a great thing as long as the technical issues are good.
Watch it. And you're on Twitter, right? What's your handle?
Carwin B.
And ours is at Jung Naiv and at Tilo Jung. So follow us. Are you on Facebook?
No.
No? No time, or out of principle?
I got off of it because all my childhood friends, it's just like too much. So
no Facebook, but bye-bye.